Hello everyone, this is Hua from the East Coast. Today is another beautiful day. The sun is out and shining, melting all the snow. I swear I heard robins this morning. Well, I am here to finish the final installment of Lethal Kisses. I hope that you have been enjoying the romantic story between Gaylin and Kristen. Please leave me a comment. Enjoy.
The final call in the middle of the night. We sit and watch the stars. So what's the problem? Tell me all your worries.
Kristen woke, juggled by everything around her, and rubbed her face. What a weird dream she had. A part of it felt so real because her emotions had been riding up and down. When she touched her eyes, there had been real tears there. So strange. She moved to the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. Today was the first day of her being a freed woman from Leonard's hold. Their divorce was finalized and done with. It meant she could move on. She received the alimony money and bought her condo. She'd cut ties with everything from him and began her new life by gently putting everything back together. She had heard that Joanne had moved into the house she lived in with Leonard and brought their 2 kids with them. It had been a long road for her to come this far in her life. From the moment she discovered Leonard had been cheating on her to the moment the legalization of her divorce came through, she had been on a roller coaster of emotions. Her grandfather had been right beside her, reassuring her that none of it was her fault. But as a woman, she'd had many thoughts that maybe it was her fault. Maybe she hadn't tried hard enough to please him, and that was why he'd detoured into another woman's arms. She'd seen the way Joanne looked when she went to visit Leonard at the office. The woman was seduction on heels, and she had kept her looks even after giving birth to 2 kids. Next to Kristen, she could see why Leonard had plucked her. But she'd forgiven the man. She did, because she deserved happiness, and if anything, she'd had too much pain in her life to last a lifetime. She was done with pain. She wanted healing, and after such a battle with hurt, she was hoping she would never have to say its name again. Somewhere inside of her, she knew that maybe the dream she had was a sign that she'd picked the wrong man to marry and love. She remembered how Leonard had always talked about Gaylin, but she'd never met him, and in the back of her mind, she came up with the idea that he was old and gray because of how her ex-husband had talked about him. The picture painted somebody who was like her grandfather. But in her dream, he was a young man with a face like an angel and a heart that needed soothing as much as she did. She didn't know much about the Gaylin Leonard was friends with in real life, but if he was anything like the one she dreamt of, she wanted him. Still disturbed by her strange dream, she forced herself to get up and shower. Her mouth felt like cotton balls, and she ignored the pounding headache. It was going to be a long day. She pulled out a white dress to wear to work. She wanted to feel renewed and made over. White seemed like a good color because it meant she, again, was going to be holy. She took extra time in putting her hair into curls, her makeup to perfection, and slipped on a pair of very high heels. This was a woman who was now renewed. This was a woman who was ready to take on the world again after a fall. As she entered her office, a few women were fanning themselves, and she looked around wondering what the heck was going on. She set her purse down and turned on her computer when she heard her boss, Sean, coming closer to her office. His voice was booming loud, and when he entered, who should be trailing behind him but the man from her dream last night, all 6'2" of him, wearing a black 3-piece suit with lips that she'd been kissing all night long and eyes that had burned into her soul. She froze and lost her breath. Sean was talking on and on about her wonderful work, and she had noticed that the man hadn't stopped staring at her. "Kristen," Sean said, "why don't you show Gaylin around?" He smiled at them both and then left the room. Gaylin moved toward her and extended his hand to her. She took it, and their hands fit perfectly together. How do you go about telling someone you just met that you dreamt about them all night long, that you dreamt of a life your soul put together? "So, you're Leonard's ex-wife," he said in a deep voice. Her dream had been right. Her dream told her everything she needed to know about this man. He was desire, walking on legs, and he was walking toward her. "I am," she said in a soft voice. "What are you doing here in town?" He didn't let her hand go, and then his eyes roamed over her body before they settled back onto her gaze. "I'm looking for comforting embraces. I'm trying something new." "Does that involve holding someone's hand longer than the usual 5 seconds?" He laughed and finally took his hand away from her. When he smiled, she felt her gut do flips, and she realized, wow, he really was incredibly intoxicating with his allure. In her dreams, he had been amazing, and now here he was, in the flesh, causing her to have the same symptoms of passion beating inside her heart. "I have a confession to make," she said as she stepped forward and closer to him. His eyes widened and he smiled. A woman who makes a confession right at first impression? Brave. I love that. Kristen's mind flashed back to her dreams and how he had been in her mind. I feel like I've known you from somewhere before." "Perhaps in a dream," he answered. She felt her heart shudder. "Perhaps. Well, are you going to show me around, or will this conversation lead us to somewhere more private? Either way, I'm loving the view in front of me already, so I'm all game." Kristen could see the fire lighting up in his eyes. He was real. Last night in her dreams, he'd been holding her, kissing her, giving her everything she desired, and yet here he was, inches from her to touch. What did a woman do in a situation like this? She smiled and gestured for them to walk out together. "After you," he said. Kristen walked out, and he fell into step as she began to explain about their agency and the many guidelines she'd remembered from past tours she'd given. Throughout the whole tour, she felt his eyes on her, and she had to take her emotions under control, or else she'd be weeping and pleading for him to take her here and now. She'd never been the type to plead, but in her heart and mind, there was always a first time for everything. "And here is where all the magic happens," she said as she opened the French doors to a conference room. He entered the room and then turned around to look at her with a smile on his face. "Explain what you mean when you say all the magic happens in here." She blushed. I meant by signing documents. Dotting the I's and crossing the T's." Gaylin let out a disappointed sigh. Too bad. I was thinking more like yes to dinner dates, that kind of magic." She laughed and leaned against the door. Are you flirting with me? He smiled and placed his hands in his pockets. No. Her smile faded and he grinned again. I don't flirt. I never flirt. I take what I like. Oh. Oh? Is that all you have to say, Kristen? Oh? She felt the heat rise to her cheeks. I'm at a loss of words. So I've been told, he said. Laughing, she replied, now you're being cocky. Oh, I know. I know I am because I already know what I want. Any more tours to see, or are we done? She swallowed hard and walked out ahead. He followed her, and when they reached the hidden hallway to the elevators, she felt Gaylin pull her toward the empty closet where they stored supplies, and his lips covered hers. It was magical, and every inch of her female parts came to life, making it impossible for her to breathe. When he pulled away, he reached out and gently ran a finger down her cheek. You know, I've always hated Leonard for doing what he did to you. The man literally did not know what he had, Gaylin said. So you know about our history together. He nodded. Of course. Your grandfather is a good friend of my father's. The two have been speaking, and it seems your name came up a lot. I was curious, and now I know why Leonard never allowed me to meet you when you two were married. Kristen shivered. Why is that? Because I would have stolen you from him. But he was smart, and he made it real easy for me. Looks like you're a free woman. How about dinner with me? Why do I have a feeling dinner will be skipped and we'll be going straight to dessert? A smile formed on his face. A woman after my own heart. I love that. I'll pick you up at 6. I'll be the one in black. He kissed her one more time, and as he walked away, Kristen felt as if her life was going to be just right, because his lethal kisses were going to be permanent things she'd be waking up to every single day. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed writing it. You know, when I began writing the story, 50 Shades of Grey had just been released. And I am a huge fan of Christian Grey. And I actually read that 50 Shades series within a week. Yes, I was that crazy. But I wanted to create a story a bit different from that series. And I wanted my main character to be a woman of sufferance, but also built strong to walk away from things she knew she should let go of. I wanted to create a man who had a dark past to come to find a woman who could save him. We hear a lot about damsel in distress, but I wanted something a bit different. I wanted a knight in distress who had a strong damsel. And so I birthed Kristen, and then Gaylin came along shortly after. If you've listened to this entire story, you'll see that the ending is not what you expected. It's a huge twist, but it leaves you already knowing what is going to happen in their relationship. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope to hear your thoughts on this story. I have many more stories coming up, and I just wanted to say thank you for all the support, likes, and shares. I appreciate all of you.